attention, please. I would ask if you would stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, it looks like we're all here, so we have a quorum. And on to 1.04, which are the meeting procedures statement that is required to be read. The governing board conducts all of its meetings, including committee meetings, in compliance with Arizona open meeting laws per Arizona Statute 33-1804, and in concert with RCSCW bylaws, policies, and standing rules. Parliamentary procedures, as outlined in the most recent edition of Robert's Rules of Order, will also be followed, consistent with Bylaw 3.07, Procedures for Owner-Member Meetings, and Standing Rules number 1 and number 3. All questions and comments are directed to the committee chairperson. All comments are entertained at the discretion of the committee chairperson. Speakers shall state their name and member number and speak in a courteous manner. The committee chairperson may limit commentary time and the number of commentators or speakers on any issue. The committee chairperson also may redirect commentary at individual agenda items to the general guest comments agenda line item, except when the committee has discussed the agenda item and consensus or agreement is sought. All fire and room safety precautions and regulations are strictly obeyed at all meetings per the guidance of the Arizona Fire and Medical Authority. The committee chairperson reserves the right to adjourn any meeting if the safety of the committee, meeting attendees, or others is deemed at risk, or if there is too much disruption to continue. After one verbal warning by the chairperson, the committee chairperson also reserves the right to ask any meeting attendees to leave any meeting should their behavior be deemed dangerous or unacceptable. Disciplinary action may follow. Well, that's one requirement we're hoping to shorten. All right, we will move on to approval of minutes. We have the minutes from the November 5th, 2024 meeting. Were there any additions, corrections, changes? If not, those minutes will stand approved as read. And we have minutes from the November 18th, 2024 meeting. Any additions or corrections or comments on those minutes? If not, those minutes will also stand. All right, moving on. We're all the way up to 3.01 already. And that would be the Chartered Club's Managers Report. And that would be our rec manager, Casey Huda. Casey.
Hi, thank you. Happy New Year. First, I just kind of want to go over some fun updates for our chartered clubs and what has happened, what's going to happen. Over the holidays, it was pretty festive if you drove around. I did stop by our G-Scale Model Railroad, which is located over at Beardsley. And I did put a video together, but I did not want to put that on here because this is a PowerPoint. So you get a little snip of their nice display that they had put together. They are getting a new ADA ramp. So thank you to Carl and the maintenance for making that happen. And then maintenance also worked with getting them new sleeves for their Christmas tunnel, which is displayed right there. So we're working on making it actually a better and safer atmosphere for them. And then I do want to give a special thanks to the officers for the club and working with us to make this happen. And then if you are a part of Boomers or the Women's Club or any of those clubs over at Kuntz, the other clubs throughout Kuntz also help quite a bit. but they had their annual Toys for Kids. They had about 189 children attend, and it was a very successful event, so congratulations to them as well. Some upcoming events, most of you know, normally Tom Jones would be here, but he'll probably be at the workshop on Friday. They have their annual art car show on February 8th, 2025. So it's just a fun activity that's put on for the community. It is free. Fitness Club has started a couple of new fitness classes. Zumba started in the summer, but it is rapidly starting to become a little bit more popular. And then they just started cardio drumming January of, well, last week, I should say. And then finally, we have the Munchie Mondays with the Munchkins. And this is what has taken place over what was formerly known as Happy Camp. I do have some modifications. This was the presentation put together last week, and then over the course of the weekend, we made some updates. But this is pretty much the gist of it. This is going to be happening Monday, March 24th, and we are partnering with the Sun City West Foundation, and then the Sun City West Witches are also going to be providing a parade, and it will be a theme of Wizard of Oz. They were able to get a dunk tank sponsored by a realtor down below, Epic Realty, and I have gotten some staff to go ahead and volunteer. When they fully give me the commitment and I get the weight capacity for the dunk tank, I will be putting the names out there. No, that includes me. Are you kidding? I'm gonna be on the dunk tank if weight capacity can hold, because I know some of you would love to do that. But it's just basically not just for the kids, but to bring the community together. We need to have fun, need to work together and understand that everything that we do is for a purpose, and there's always good in everything, no matter if you're dunking somebody in a tank or we're working together to come up with solutions. But with that being said, there are a few little things I have to button up with the foundation, so that will be finalized, and I'll talk about it more in depth with each club with our officers meeting, which is going to be held tomorrow and Thursday. If you do not know anything about that, please let me know so I can give you your time and date, because they're 2 different days, and they are separated by categories. And then Monday, April 7th, is the Classic Car Parade, which will be held by ARC. I've already talked to them, so that should be another fun one. If if the dunk tank goes over well, we might as well just do it again or come up with something more creative. And then Monday, April 21st, is the day after Easter, so I do have TBD on there. I have this so spread out so that I could try and grasp all of the different spring breaks throughout the country. And I know a lot of private schools do kind of revolve around Easter, so that's why that date is in place. So I'm hoping you guys will enjoy that, and I hope you guys also really work with us. And like I said, I'm going to talk more in depth about how clubs' involvement will be more available tomorrow and Thursday at the officers' meetings. That's it.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from any of the committee members? Any questions or comments from the audience? Wow, that was good. Quick. We will move on to our committee liaison reports. Who would like to give their report? David, please give us a start.
I'm the liaison with the CART groups, and I've met with all of the presidents and some of the other members of their club so far, and the intent mostly was to see if they had any issues with the current RR&Ps, because I'm also on the working group, so that we could pass those along. But and we've done that, and there was a couple other issues that came up that Casey was able to help with the clubs, but everybody seems to be happy with their groups. So.
Sounds good. Any other comments from the committee? Yes. Cheryl.
Okay, the fitness club started the cardio drumming, and the first class was last Thursday. We had 25 people there, either drumming or watching. Today we had a second class, and there was another 25 people, and most of those were different. So when we get going, it's going to be loud, very loud at the social hall. And I have to say, the staff there has been fantastic. I wanted to thank them in front of everyone. They're really, really good.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments. Any comments from the audience? Yes, Denise.
Hi, Nancy and I have these social clubs, and we've been able to meet with 7 of them so far. We still have 3 to go. So we may have to reach out to see the new presidents, who they are, because we have 3 that just haven't responded. And we will, any problems we have, we're doing write-ups with them, so.
All right. Go ahead, Casey.
We are currently in the process of collecting the updated CR5s, and there'll be obviously friendly reminders this week. So I'm giving clubs until next Friday to get those in, so then I can get you guys a new updated fresh list, and then also start sending my emails out.
Excellent, thank you. Any other liaison reports from the committee? Go ahead, Pat.
I have 25 clubs, the Arts and Crafts Club, so I've met with 20 of those, and I'm having a little problem also getting responses from some, so I'll be anxious to get that new list. Maybe I have the wrong information. All of the ones that I've met with are happy. There's been no issues. I've just been so impressed with what's available in this community. I mean, you see the names of the clubs, but when you actually go in and visit and see what they do and what they're capable of doing in those clubs, it's just astounding. So I've really enjoyed meeting with all of them.
All right, great, thank you. Any other comments on that from the committee? Mike, did you have a report?
Yeah, I met with, when I first came on board back in November, I met with all the presidents, well, most of them except for one of all the clubs I was assigned. And now that things are changing over, our CR5s are coming in. So it's going to be a repeat process, go through and meet the new presidents or the ones that have been reelected. But I'm keeping in touch with the ones that are, and they're all doing good.
Excellent, I appreciate all the time and effort taken by all the committee members to meet with all the different clubs. It's a job, but I appreciate it. Any other comments from the committee on the liaison reports? Yes, go ahead, Vicki.
I work with the hobby clubs, and I sent out letters to all of the current presidents in the fall, and I heard back from all of them, except one. And I have met with 5 of them, and I was quite surprised when I walked into a general meeting with the Desert Garden Club, and they had a speaker that wasn't just business for the club. They had a speaker, and I was enthralled for an hour. I learned all about desert plants, and I always thought my acacia was a cactus, but apparently it's not. And just in case you have one, and when it doesn't rain, it starts looking like it's going to die. It's not. It's called drought deciduous. It drops its leaves and its flowers, and as soon as it rains, it's going to be happy again. So I was very, very happy to hear that. There are a couple of the clubs that I knew were going to have new incoming, at the very least presidents, so I've held them off until January, and they are on my calendar to meet with. And I'm going to drag my husband along to the investment club meeting on a Monday night, because he likes to do that kind of thing. Me, not so much. I'll be there on business, and he can take notes. So that's where I am.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else? Any comments from the audience? comments online? All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to new business, 4.01 is an update on club space expansion requests. Well, if you've been to any of the Charter Club meetings, you know that the Clay Club and Glass Fusion and Enameling had requested additional space. We've discussed this at a couple of meetings, and it really hasn't gotten anywhere. So I have called for a meeting on January 28th, it's a Tuesday, 9 a.m. at the Village Meeting Room, and we will have 2 representatives each from the Clay Club, from Glass Fusion and Enameling, Computers West, Photography West, Properties Committee, Budget and Finance Committee, and we will also have staff there. Our General Manager, Stephen Erno, will be there. Our Ops Manager, Carl Wilhelm, will be there, as well as our Rec Manager, Casey Huda. So instead of listening to arguments in one committee and then passing it to the next committee and then passing it to the next committee, hopefully we will have a chance to have some good discussion and have some sort of recommendation to forward to the board. Again, January 28th. So any comments on that?
Yeah, can you just go through that? It's going to be January 28th, where at and what time?
It's be at the Village Meeting Room
Okay,
at 9 a.m.
thank you.
right next door. All right. Any comments from the audience? Nothing online. We will move on. Update on the West Valley League Tennis Club accommodation request. I will turn this over to Casey in a moment. My only comment is that we just have not, we've received volumes of information from the tennis club, but we have realistically no new information to reconsider an accommodation request. And with that, I will let Casey make some comments.
All right, I'm going to try and actually give you an update in a nutshell. This has been ongoing since 2017. I just want to kind of keep that open. I have received the full schedule of West Valley League for both men and women. There are a total of 11 communities and/or groups associated with the West Valley League, not including Sun City West, for a total of 12. Only 2 age-restricted communities are willing to sign. I assigned the club leadership to get me the contact of all directors, managers, supervisors, or however they're titled, so I can reach out to them. Between Larry's update and mine regarding reciprocal, this is where we stand today. Sun City is willing to sign. Cortabella already signed. Pebble Creek, they have not given any final answer on a social reciprocity. Sun City Festival and Happy Trail Club presidents will not present to their management team. Trilogy, I did get in contact with their director, however, he never responded to 2 of my meeting requests. Grand and Verado, we agreed with the club that they would not be in any attempt for reciprocity based on Grand saying no, that they do not agree with reciprocity, and an email from Verado also saying no. Surprise, Paseo, and Wigwam are not applicable as they are not age-restricted communities. Based on policy that's currently written, my suggestion to the club would be to open the idea of working with only Cortabella and Sun City and do your own small reciprocity competition between the 2 communities. This gives the club other competitions in the area while staying in compliance with our policies. As this was recommended, I'm still unsure if the club is willing to make this change. With change comes challenges, and we are asking the club to take on challenges as the way our current policy is written, and this could never allow the league to continue. Examples of clubs who have taken on challenges to assure they are in compliance with the policies are the softball club with the Commingle and the Sun Cities League, softball league, and pickleball with their Apple League. So those are some of the different clubs that have also had to change due to our policies in place.
Thank you, Casey. I would say that Casey has gone above and beyond in trying to contact clubs and to get them to respond to the requests that we have. And it's really not necessarily her job. It's the club that is supposed to be making those contacts and getting those reciprocity agreements signed. So I think we've done all we can at this point, and until we have additional information, that's the way it'll stay. Any comments from the committee? Comments from the audience? Yes, sir. Please give us your name and your rec card number, please.
Testing, it's working. My name is Larry Plaster, and my rec card number is 130627. And I'd like to comment in two areas. First of all, I understand what Casey is working towards and trying to put in place, but the social exchanges like pickleball does with Sun City, and like she's recommending that we do with the communities, 2, maybe 3, that we can get a reciprocal agreement signed with, that's social tennis. That's not the same as a league. A league is much different. You belong to a team, you have a partner, and you play competitive tennis against other communities with the chance of, if you play well enough, going to a playoff and winning a league. This kind of tennis is the kind where when you get ready to play, you get nervous, your hands sweat, you want to play well, you want to play well for your partner, you want to play well for your team. That's competitive league tennis. Social tennis is far different. You play one day, you don't keep score, and you party afterwards. That won't take the place of West Valley League. It's just not the same. As far as our request for an accommodation this year, we're very disappointed we couldn't do that. We were asked to provide proof that the other communities would not sign a reciprocal agreement. I did that, put it all in a volume. We were asked to provide proof that we had worked in the past and could not get agreements signed. I put that in a document and we submitted that. That was deemed not enough. And I was told that you needed to have the actual emails that showed that we could not get agreements this year. I put that together and sent that in. So what we were told in order to get an accommodation considered is this is what you have to provide. We provided it, and yet it still wasn't considered. We asked for an accommodation this year to give us time to work on alternatives for the coming year. We know it's not a permanent solution, but it's disappointing that we could not get that considered, because I don't know what else we could have presented everything we were asked to present.
Thank you, Larry. And from our perspective, all I can say is given the current RR&Ps, there's really nothing left for us to do. So,
well, I understand what you're saying, but we were back in September when we knew we were going to have a problem. I was advised that you need to request an accommodation. This is your path forward. We did that. We submitted everything we needed, and yet was still denied. So everything we were recommended to do was unsuccessful, despite huge efforts. I spent literally dozens of hours putting documents together, and there just seemed to be nothing we could do. And I know that Casey has a different vision, but it's not the same. West Valley League competitive tennis is not social tennis.
all right, thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Yes, go ahead, Pat.
If I recall, I kind of agree with Larry. The last meeting, because an accommodation is to do something that is outside of the RR&Ps. So at the last meeting where they requested the accommodation, they were told that they needed to show proof, as Larry said, of who wouldn't sign it, the history of who wouldn't sign it, and that's what they were told they had to have in order to bring back the request for accommodation to the next meeting. So I'm not sure how we got from that direction that they were told they needed to do to all of this other thing that now has come into play. That's what they were told at the last meeting we had. So where did that go astray?
I think the difference is saying that you talk to somebody and they refuse to sign isn't the same as having an email from them saying that we refuse to sign for this reason, or having them sign a letter or a document that says, because of this and this, we will not sign this for your accommodation. And I don't think we have that from all the different, we don't have that from all the different clubs. Yes, Jack.
I go.
Go ahead, Casey.
I do want to say that I went over every single community and or organization in this that's listed. And the problem is some of these are not going to sign. There is documentation from past. Grand is one of them. They will never sign that document. And I did reiterate that in an email that Verado said that they would not either. And then Surprise, Paseo, and Wigwam, which is 3. Now we're at 5 of the total 12. They're not applicable because they're not age restricted. So there are a lot of other things that are in place here that make it a little bit more challenging and complicated. I just wanted to kind of point that out and remind to make it.
Appreciate that. Name and rec card number, please.
Jack Leary, 128260. I just wanted to add that doing all of those things to get an accommodation request, first of all, it is a request, and doing all of the things that are part of that request is not an automatic that you're going to get it. It is information to make an informed decision on the policy of this association.
Thank you. Yes, Mike.
The question I have is, what is the contention here? Is it whether it's a social event or whether it's a competitive event?
I don't think it depends on either of those. I think
Okay.
regardless of the event, whether it's a social event or not, I mean, that's semantics with each event, whether it is or not. But we have nothing against the West Valley League. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for tennis players. It's just they haven't been able to meet what we need to have an accommodation.
Well, I just wanted to clarify the competition that pickleball has with Sun City is a true definition of competition because it's done once a month and scores are kept, and it's basically a right of, it's bragging rights between each community on who wins. Having played in it myself, I know it's a true competition. It's hard fought. You play hard games. You play 6 games per month or per competition, basically. And you train for it with your partner. It's a true competition. So that's why I was asking whether the contention here was, or whether it's a competition or a social event. But since that's a moot point, then.
Yeah, it's a moot point, and they do have a reciprocal agreement with Sun City for pickleball. So, Nick?
Yeah, I'm kind of echoing Pat's thoughts here in that we have policies as written in the RR&Ps about what a club must do in order to run an external league, take part in an external league with home and away games, and what the communities are that can, that qualify to take part in that league. And that's what the rules say. We also have the accommodation request, which allows a club to do something which the rules would normally not allow. And in order to put forward that request, we ask for certain bits of information. And I'm not certain that the tennis club have been given the opportunity to present revised information that meets all the criteria that we've been asked for, that then we can make a recommendation. I think we're kind of stalled here, where, you know, from what I've seen as liaison for the tennis club, I've not been deeply involved in this, but the information I've seen as liaison from the tennis club seems to suggest to me that the information we asked for is available, yet somehow they're not being allowed to present it. And I think that's possibly a little unfair.
Okay, appreciate those comments. Is there anybody else on the committee that thinks that we should give another hearing to the tennis club? Please, Vicky.
If I recall correctly, when the tennis made its presentation, there was one glaring set of documentation that was missing, and that was the demonstrable evidence that they had indeed attempted to get the other communities to sign the reciprocal agreement. I believe that we, as the committee, should be able to see that. It's not our job to grant an accommodation. We don't have the power to do that. The only thing that we are able to do is look at the documentation that's been presented by any club who's requesting an accommodation and saying, yes, your portfolio is complete. You have provided us with all of the information that we need, and then we either make a recommendation to pass the accommodation request on, or we decide that we're not going to make the recommendation, that it should be passed on. That's the only thing that we are able to do as a Charter Clubs Committee. I myself think that we need to see that documentation to make sure it's complete and have the opportunity to do what we're supposed to do, either recommend that it move forward or that it not.
Thank you for your comments.
Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, David.
I agree with Vicky. We asked them, we felt that there wasn't the right documentation, no proof. We asked them to present it, and I haven't seen that or had a chance to see that documentation myself to make an informed decision. So I would like to see that. And again, our job was to consensus whether we thought the accommodation, we would arrive at a consensus and either pass on the recommendation or not to the governing board. So I would echo that I haven't seen that data and would like the opportunity to and make an informed decision.
Go ahead, Vicky.
The one additional thing that I would say, going back to what Larry did mention today, is that the tennis club realizes that even if they were granted an accommodation, which again, reminding you, we don't have the power to do, all we can do is move it forward. They realize that an accommodation, if granted, is a temporary thing, and they would have the rest of this year to figure out a different way to approach what they want to achieve with league play. So I think that's it.
Nobody's happy about this. Tennis club isn't happy. I don't think any of us are happy. Complying with an accommodation request is brutal. We would be happy to forward all the correspondence that we have gotten from the tennis club to all of the committee members. I don't think that's a problem. We'll be happy to get it to all of you. I suppose it's, what is it, Casey, 40, 50, 60 pages of correspondence and emails. And the last thing that I had requested from the tennis club was didn't want to look at 50 or 60 pages of somewhat organized but somewhat unorganized documentation. I requested a one-page summary with attachments, if there were relevant attachments, a one-page summary for each of the other clubs that are in the West Valley League. We never did receive that. We received a one-page summary with a one sentence for each of the clubs, but no documentation attached. In other words, email from the club or a letter from the club saying that, no, we're not going to sign a reciprocal agreement. So, but I don't have a dog in this fight here. If the committee would like to see all the information, we'd be happy to forward it to all the committee members. And if I hear from enough committee members that they feel we should have another hearing on this, that would be fine. I think the tennis club has already been the beneficiary of General Manager Stephen Erno basically gave them, what, a month to try and get their house in order and get us all the documentation. And that period has since expired or expires today, maybe. And we're not having an accommodation does not prevent the West Valley League from having their league. It's just that all the people that come here to play are going to have to pay the daily fee. They're going to have to pay the $6 to be able to be part of that competition for that day. So it's not the best situation we could have for a league, but it's not being prevented from that perspective. Larry, did you have some more comments?
Well, just one, John. The one-page summary you requested, I did send you. I can send it again, but I did do that the day after. So that I did that. I sent you also all of the emails verbatim in an email that had all of them. Now, there's a bunch, that's a lot of data, but I did do that. And yeah, we can continue with the West Valley League by paying the guest fee, but the visitors are not going to pay the guest fee. The tennis club will have to do that. So it's still a penalty to the tennis club to have to go that way. We asked to give us more time. Prior to 2019, we used a different form for approval of the West Valley League. Now, maybe the reciprocal agreement existed at that time. I know Jack says it did, but it wasn't enforced. We used a different form. That changed in 2019, and we began trying to get reciprocal agreements. And as Casey said, we've been trying since 2017 to do that unsuccessfully. But every step, and I documented this in the first thing I sent, every step of the way we worked with the general manager saying, what do we do? We were told we're working on it. The RR&Ps are not yet final. Go ahead and do what you're doing. We did not continue to play in defiance of the rules. We followed the direction of our general manager up until this year. Even in the April of this year, there was a policy MO4 that we were told was going to address this external league problem. That was proposed. It had problems. It was not adopted. And we were told at that time, it was said, well, we're going to take it back and rework it and resubmit it, was the understanding. So we didn't do anything this year until it came September, and we found out MO4 wasn't going to go forward, and we were out of time then to do anything as an alternative. So we asked for the accommodation to give us time. That's what we want. We know it's not a permanent solution.
Yes, go ahead, Nancy.
Hey, Larry, $6 doesn't sound like much, but when you add all of that up, what are you looking at
Yeah.
for money that, in order to stay in this league, to do it correctly, how much do you have to raise to send to the rec department?
Yeah, I've sent that to Casey, but, and don't get me wrong, I really appreciate Mr. Erno and Casey's accommodation to let us get through December. We appreciate that. But for the remaining home matches, it's about $800.
So Casey, can you do some fundraising?
Well, that.
With some tennis
you know,
rackets?
Maybe the foundation will work with them at the
Well-
second Munchie Mondays.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of
You
thinking.
can throw
this just-
all me in the water all you want.
Yeah, no, and maybe that's our solution. Maybe we go do a fundraiser to help support this in the future. It's too late for this year. That's why we're asked for the accommodation.
Yeah.
In lieu of that, this will get a little confusing. Jack, feel free to say, Casey, stop. But in our policies, it is stated that guest credit is not to be used during club functions. So technically, this wouldn't be a club activity.
There are so many catch-22s in all of this that it's, you know, we went out and interviewed 8 or 9 clubs, and they are so anxious and bit fed up with the big brother thing here. You know, we're all retired people, we're not little kids, but this kind of feels like that too, that it just seems like we're just chasing our tail, and yet our really good tennis players can't be competitive. Is that what's gonna happen when pickleball, surprise, lines up and we have all these, same thing, but it'll be for pickleball?
Yeah.
Same thing would happen, right?
It's a domino effect, but it has
Yeah.
to be approved or recommended through the committee to go ahead and move forward. But there's, I guess this might be the elephant in the room, the difference of availability for clubs, if it's even available. So if, I'll just use pickleball, for instance, wants to bring in a league at 10 a.m., that's not going to happen because their courts are full at 10 a.m. during this season. But if they wanted to look at something for an accommodation, maybe at 2 p.m., we would have to do a little research and see how utilized those courts are during that time to see if it's even capable.
And then they would have to pay the fee for people visiting from, say, Surprise.
It would be out, if it's outside of a club activity, they did do that. That's how they did go through Apple. Now, Apple's not near as active as it was, 2 years ago, I think it was. It was a club function, and then they realized it was probably overusing their courts more so than the membership wanted. So then it just became a one-off that if you were a member of the community, the captain of that group would pay for the $6 for that group. However many outsiders came in to play, they would pay for them. And I will honestly say that we ran a full audit on that, and they truly did do that. The one thing they did do is take that receipt and put it in their pocket so that they couldn't utilize that at other facilities.
Sure.
So they did do some good due diligence there. So that's how they fixed their Apple play.
This is going to continue to come up, I have a feeling, and, you know, what I'd like to see, you know, obviously, I don't know if I need 45 pages. I'd like to see a pro and a con. I'd like to see, you know, what they have submitted, that kind of thing. What specific RR&P has it violated or that? We're going to hit this over and over again. We might as well tackle it best we can with tennis.
I think you will have that opportunity as our working group will be forwarding you their revisions to the RR&Ps, and you will have ample opportunity to present what you think should be changed in the RR&Ps. And there's I'm sure that discussion could go on for a long time, but it's worth discussing. I don't disagree that sometimes I just get frustrated because, well, my job is to enforce the RR&Ps, whether I like them or not. And so that's what I am trying to do, not necessarily that I think that they are perfect the way they are, but let's go through the process. If if we don't like them, let's go through the process and change them. So I would agree with you there.
So if we got specific ones that we needed to change, the committee could tackle that. Feels like money is all that's needed here. It's way too simple, I'm sure.
I don't think this is about money at all. This is just about having the RR&Ps say what we want them to say for the benefit of our community, basically. So,
Yeah, and I would say that there's the tennis club, this committee, even parts of the community that find themselves between a rock and a hard place. One of the things I've heard as I've been talking with people about the tennis club and the accommodation request, I hear two things. Like, why are you stopping sports clubs from playing sports competition? And the other thing I hear is, why are you letting all these outsiders come here and play for free? I'm not paying my annual dues, so all these people can come here and play tennis for free. So we have to try and find the balance between those two things.
agreed. Thanks for the comments. And,
One more if you're
Yeah.
taking a consent.
Yeah, just one follow-up. Nancy, Casey brought up that there's an issue with payment of guest fees during club time. Just want to make it understood that we have always considered this a club activity. We don't allow non-club members to play in West Valley League. So we still would like to keep it that way. As far as people coming in here to play free, it's a little different for these kind of competitions. When I came here to look at the facility and the tennis facility and the club before I moved here, one of my expectations is that I would be able to play external leagues. As a longtime tennis player, that's a priority for me. So most of the tennis players here believe that that's part of their benefits that we pay for. We have a tennis facility that will allow us to play external leagues in competition. So it's not just letting people come in for free. It's something that I expected to have as a resident of Sun City West.
Thank you, Larry. I think this will require some more consideration, and we will send all the information to all the committee members that we currently have. And if they get back to me and request that the tennis club has another hearing, I would be happy to put that on the agenda. So,
John, just one
go ahead, David.
clarification. They submitted data before. If that's part of this package, I don't think I need that again. I just need the proof that we were asking for before. But if that's 45 pages worth, then I understand.
It's a lot of information. Anyway, any other comments from the audience? If not, anything online, Nick? If not, we will move along. 4.03 is the proposed fiscal year 25-26 CIP R&R $50,000 plus items. We have Carl.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. It is my pleasure to be able to share the FY2025-26 proposed capital improvement projects to our committees throughout the season. Earlier this week we did, or last week we did Properties Committee. And as we go through our monthly cycle of committees, the documents that you're going to see here today are going to be displayed at every committee. This year we've changed things up a little bit to help the process. So the items that you're seeing are relevant to the Charter Clubs Committee, as were the items that were relevant to the Properties Committee. For anybody in the committee here or in the audience that's interested in seeing our full proposed capital improvement projects, I encourage you to go to either the Governing Board Workshop this month or the BNF Committee later this month. So to get started, I always begin with our color block document here. What this represents is the difference between new items and repair and replacement items. New items are items that have been brought up for proposal for the governing board to consider that aren't allocated as a current asset. They're a new idea, a new project. Sometimes these items, after completion, become assets of the community. And then our blue section today is things right from our reserve study tool that have met their useful life. So starting off, the relevant items for this year for the Chartered Clubs Committee is the Beardsley Clay Club and Glass Enameling discussion, room expansion for architectural documents and fees. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in detail, and I'm not. I'm going to expand on that right here. Our next part of the presentation is above 50,000. So to make it clear that this request is for the discussion of expansion for those two clubs. And if we get to a place that it's required in next year's business to have an architect or engineers or other outside source, this $30,000 is for that availability to move forward into another year's discussion and get a project eventually approved if that's what the governing board decides to do. Moving on, in our reserve study area in blue, we have the lawn bowling regrassing. Todd's going to talk about that in detail. We have R.H. Johnson tennis courts windscreens, all 16 courts having the windscreens replaced. And then also a Kuntz softball field, outfield electronic scoreboard, which I'll talk in a little bit more detail here. So again, folks, this is not the entire proposed capital list for FY25-26. If you would like to see that, please go to the Governing Board Workshop or the Budget and Finance Committee. We can move on to the other presentation. Thank you, Laura. In detail, each year during this time frame, we start off with the above $50,000 capital items to have a little bit more in-depth conversation about those items. As I mentioned, this is the items relevant to the Chartered Clubs Committee. This is the slide that shows what is being proposed in the overall capital budget for FY25-26 for the governing board to review. We have $190,000 proposed in new capital. Repair and replacement items for the recreation departments of the rec centers is $2,068,512. Repair and replacement in the golf and landscaping divisions, $2,714,776. And our yearly allowances at $520,000. Little note on allowances, generally, these are items that are unexpected, unknown, repairs, new ideas, things that come up during a business year that need to be handled with the approval of either the general manager or the governing board. And it allows, generally we have about $420,000 yearly. And this year, due to advancements and conversations in our technological part of our department, we've been asked to include an extra $100,000 in case there's improvements needed in the FY25-26 business cycle. For an overall budget, in the capital budget of $5,493,288. Items relevant to the Charter Committee in R&R, repair and replacement, is the R.H. Johnson tennis courts windscreens 1 through 16. This is pretty cut and dry. All the screens are 8 years old. In the Properties Committee, the question was asked, not all of them look that bad, but history tells us that if we stall and try to get an extra year out of some items, we end up on the losing side of that. And particularly at tennis, that came true on the resurfacing project. We extended a few extra years, and we had to do a rushed approval for court resurfacing. So we think it's prudent to just get the windscreens done, and between this year's resurfacing project and next year doing tennis windscreens, if approved, that facility will be top-notch shape. Moving on, we have the Kuntz softball field outfield electronic scoreboard. You may have heard that the softball club and our general manager have had discussions with Liberty Field, and Liberty Field offered to the softball club to fund this scoreboard. And that funding so far has been approved by the governing board. So at this point, we are moving forward with replacing the scoreboard from the funding of Liberty Buick. This is a financial project in our accounting system, so it still has to go on one budget or another. So currently, until that project is completed in the fiscal 24-25 year successfully, it'll remain on this proposed 25-26 budget until we know that it can be removed. But most likely, the 70,000 will be an item actually being deleted from this budget discussion. And then lastly, Todd Petty is going to talk about the R.H. Johnson Lawn Bowl Greens.
Good afternoon. I just have one item on today's list, and as Carl mentioned, it's the regrassing of the lawn bowl greens over at R.H. Johnson. We have 4 greens over there. We're looking at regrassing 2 of those. Just a little background on the greens over there. They are approaching about 45 years old, so they're past their useful life. They have 328 TIF on them right now, which is what we have on the golf course greens. And the difference is that we overseed the golf course greens every year. We do not overseed the lawn bowl greens. And so they really take a beating during the winter months with all the foot traffic and everything. When you overseed, you actually provide a layer of protection for the Bermuda grass during the high season. So that's the big difference with that. We're looking at doing greens 1 and 2 with a type of ultra dwarf or a TIF eagle. That's kind of the latest and greatest right now in the new Bermuda grass. And I was telling Nick, by the time we do the project in April of 26, there may be a new variety out. So we'll kind of look forward to that if it's out there. So the cost of the project is $337,459, and then we would start this project in April of 2026. We'd like to get it approved in this budget. So just some advantages of the new Bermuda grass out there. It's drought and disease tolerant, resistant. It requires less nitrogen, which is good. That'll save a little bit of money for us in our fertilizer account. Better color retention under cool weather conditions. Less thatch buildup, which is important. In the summertime, you get a lot of thatch on the greens that we have right now, and it takes a lot of time and effort to remove that thatch. Tends to be more forgiving when subject to aggressive maintenance practices that we have, especially the verticutting during the summer months, the core aerification, that's another, and also the lower height of cut that we have over there. We mow those at about 1/8 of an inch year round, and sometimes a little bit lower in the summer. Improve speed and consistency and overall playability, which is important for tournament play. So that's my proposal for the upcoming 25-26 budget, capital budget for lawn bowl.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Carl, do you have anything else to say?
No, I'm just sorry that mine's not as interesting as Todd's, so. But come to Budget and Finance, and I promise you, you'll hear a lot more information. Again, we'll be reviewing the entire capital budget and primarily focusing on slides like you've seen today for items over 50,000. Our February discussions will be items then over 100,000 in detail. So this is how our budget accelerates each year towards getting approval. So if you have any questions for Todd or I, we're here to take those real quick.
Any questions? Nancy?
Hey, Carl, I have 2 of them. I might have missed something, but I thought that the expansion of the clay and the glass, we kind of finished that. Did I miss a meeting or something?
Well,
It's going to continue?
this is on the discussion from Director Chatton that
This is the meeting on the 28th
on the
Okay, so
coming up.
we don't need to worry about that right now.
if this becomes an active project,
Okay, you'll need 30,000.
then the governing board will make that decision and give us direction. So, yeah.
One other thing real quick, Carl, is there going to be installation costs for us when that sign comes in at 50,000? Are you, with maintenance, you need to put another 12 in it and to install it, or what?
Well, you'll notice that in my proposal, I have 70,000.
Yeah.
So we'll see how this plays out. The club seems to think that it's right now all-inclusive. I'm being hopeful. So as your capital projects manager, it's my responsibility to make sure that, if there's any extras, we're prepared. The general if there was any extras, it would be in the general manager's signing authority for me to do any little minor changes. Things don't always go perfectly, so we'll see.
It's the joy of maintenance.
Mike?
So that 70,000 was just an overage, not an overage, but any incidentals that may have.
Known costs of multiple signs when it was in my court for discussion
Right.
before it was offered up as a donation.
Yeah, I was just going to ask
And
about the
then,
delta between the 50 and the 70. Is there-
15,000 approximately
Okay.
for unknowns.
Okay.
John, if I may.
Sure.
My understanding with my discussion with President Nick Misu of softball, the agreement is for the scoreboard and installation. They will cover the cost. That's my understanding of the contract.
I don't
Yeah.
have that contract in my hand, so that's,
Any other questions or comments for Carl or Pat? Any from the audience? Yes, please go to the mic and state your name and Rex card number, please.
My name's Janet Dashel, 129519. I'm a member of the lawn bowling, and it's my understanding that the concrete and the restroom sewer system, like the whole thing needs to be wiped out and replaced, not just a couple things. So can you address what's going on with the entire lawn bowling courts and facility?
this is a very good question. So over the last couple of years, this discussion's been had about all of the assets that are surrounding and part of lawn bowling. Todd's discussion on turf is to keep the club in a playable condition based on the age of the turf. All those other assets that you just mentioned, the concrete, anything else, the building itself, are items that are tracked and saved for in our reserve study. They are fully funded, actually. So with the general manager's initiatives on strategic planning and then following up with that probably on our upcoming long-term plans for construction improvements around the communities or new things, that will be an item that will be considered. But the funds are there for when the determination of improvements to that area will be taken care of.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions or comments? Anything online, Nick? Thank you, Carl. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Cheryl.
I know a while back, they talked about the pads on the softball field. Were those going to be replaced or not at the moment?
Internally, we've discussed with the club and general manager and CFO that the timing of that is acceptable to the softball club to happen at the same time that the fence replacement occurs, which was a little further out than what we would like. So we have kind of brought that in by a year or two. So when those stars align, all of that will get replaced. And primarily why it was okay with the softball club is because they did get the general manager's approval to continue advertising on the crash pads, which covers up the age.
Good thing, because I walked around.
There
and
you
it
go.
was- Yeah, there's only so much paint we'll
Yeah.
take care of.
So all parties are happy.
Thank you much, Carl.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
You too. All right. We will move right along. I believe that Nick Turner has a presentation on what their working group has been working on furiously.
Yes, we have, and you'll probably be pleased to hear that we won't be reading the entire RR&Ps out loud. We'll be just looking at some highlights. As most of you are aware, as part of the duties of the Chartered Clubs Committee, in fact, the duties of all the standard committees is to review policies which are relevant to the area of that committee. The Chartered Clubs Committee doesn't have policies, but we do have the RR&Ps, rules, requirements and procedures for chartered clubs, and these act as policies of the governing board. So it's our duty to review them, make recommended changes, if any, to the governing board, and then the governing board can then decide whether they adopt those changes or not. This year, Chairman Chatin asked us to form a working group in order to do this, rather than having tedious and detailed discussions in committee meetings like this. So that working group has been meeting. So if we can move on, please, to the next slide. I'm just going to quickly go through who we are, what we did, where our input came from, and so on. We had some good suggestions which have not been incorporated, and I'll discuss those. And then I'm going to do a quick highlight of the key recommended changes that we've come up with and what our next steps are. So again, next slide, thanks. John asked Vicky and myself to lead the working group. And we also invited Pat and David from the Chartered Clubs Committee to come along as well. And we asked Dory Miller, who some of you may know, used to work in the administration, working with Casey on chartered clubs. So she had good background from an administration point of view and dealing with clubs. Dory unfortunately couldn't continue, so Connie, who has also done a lot of work on the RR&Ps and a former member of the committee, joined us. So what have we done so far? We've met 9 times. We've worked individually on changes to the RR&Ps and proofreading. We've read every word in the RR&Ps more than once. We have considered lots of input and suggestions, and we've made some changes. Well, we have some recommended changes, I should say, which have added a few new requirements into the RR&Ps. Now, those are actually mostly legitimizing current practices that everybody thinks are good practices that should continue anyway, but for one reason or another, were not actually allowed by the RR&Ps. And you'll see some of those as we go through the review. We've allowed some adaptation for when technology changes, and we've clarified some confusing requirements, and there were some errors, and which we have fixed. It was an extensive review, and I'd like to say as well that the proposed change, I'm speaking here, the proposed changes are not mine. They are a consensus of the working group, some of which I agreed with, some of which I didn't. And that will be the same, that will be true for all members of the working group. So we took input from several sources. Those of you who are new club presidents won't have seen this, but the existing and retiring club presidents will know that we asked for their input. We got responses from 6 of them. We got 17 suggestions. We reviewed all of those. We spoke with the recreation manager, the general manager, and the CFO. And of course, we also used our own experience. We've got Chartered Club committee members. Most of us have been officers or are officers of chartered clubs. We work as liaisons with chartered clubs, and we've got experience on this committee. So that's what we base these changes on. And I'll say again, they're not my ideas. This is a consensus view of the working group. There's some things that came up and some good suggestions that we didn't work on, and that was mainly for lack of time. And also some of these do require a certain amount of thought. One was which is to just reorganize the RR&Ps completely into chapters which refer to clubs by type: sports clubs, craft clubs, social clubs. The issue there is that all the RR&Ps apply to all of the clubs, and you're probably going to end up with a lot of cross-referencing, which might make them even more unreadable than they are now. Yes, we all agree the chapters on discipline are extremely long and not necessarily convoluted, but it's a step-by-step guide, and that varies considerably by whoever it is who's being disciplined, whether it's an individual member, a club member, a board member, the club itself. It was suggested that we just write down those steps and then have a call out for how that differs. But again, you're into cross-references and probably going to make it even more unreadable. One suggestion, which is probably a good one, which again, in terms of lack of time and complexity just to work through all the issues, is that the discipline section be reduced to that where the only discipline that the clubs are managing is that where the members have broken a club rule. They've cheated at cards. They haven't taken the necessary safety training to use the equipment in a workshop, for example. And that all of the matters of discipline, which are behavioral, people who are being rude, they're being obnoxious, they're being aggressive, that all of that is actually managed under the existing policies and bylaws of the association, that as it would, for people just misbehaving in a recreation centre or the bowling alley or on a golf course. And one other final aspect is that we know that golf chartered clubs are managed differently in some ways, and that we need perhaps to write an appendix or even have a completely different set of RR&Ps to govern golf clubs. So I'm going to go through the recommended changes we have, but I'm not going to look at all of them. Some of them were simply typos and clarifications. Some of them, we had a couple of rules that were in the definition section, so we've taken those out. But we are going to talk about all material changes. And another reminder, these are not my RR&Ps. Those of you who've been looking at the document will see that all of the changes are put down under my name. That's because I was the logged-in user who was using the Microsoft Word, and so it records it as being my name. These changes, again, are a consensus of the whole working group. So Laura's now going to just switch to the other document, and if you can go to page 13, please, Laura. We'll zoom in so you can see it. Those of you who are online or have been at home, these are attached as PDFs to the document to the agenda in board docs. So the first thing and this is one where we know there is going to be some controversy and there will probably be some debate. And the reason this change was made is that originally the commingling is prohibited on Sun City West properties at all times and in all circumstances. We've just put a little carve out here to say that commingling is prohibited when it's a team or group that represents the chartered club or represents Sun City West. And the motivation for us doing this is that because if this is interpreted strictly, then Cardiac Kids, Swing into Spring, and Fun in the Sun, and probably some other club activities would require an accommodation request because they have commingled teams that do not represent. It's Nick's Marauders, Larry's Vikings, who are playing as a team, and that team may be commingled with residents and non-residents, but they're having a fun day, having a fun competition, they're raising money for charities. I don't see why we should force them to go through an accommodation request to do something that everybody thinks they should be doing anyway. So that's why that change is being made. There is another change later on if this does get rejected. There's another one which calls it out specifically for special events. So we go to number 19, please, Laura, page 19. In several areas of the RR&Ps, there are references and cross-references to an appendix which has the formula for calculating the participation rates. The recreation centres, Casey's team have developed the software and the reporting to calculate participation rates. My understanding is there are slight differences between that and the formula that we had here, so we just deleted the formula. And so the participation rates and the reporting that you get from Casey and her team will continue as now. We don't feel that we need to be saying what that formula is. Also on number 19, and this is on page 19, this is coming in from and it's in 4.5 there, just down towards the bottom. This came in from a club president. Just a little clarification as to why the clubs are required to track their visitors and guests. The simple answer is it's so that you can make sure you're following your own bylaws. And the next page, 20, please, Laura. This is another request that came in through the administration. The RR&Ps required the chartered clubs to have a tax status registered with the IRS. I don't know where the issues lie, but I suspect it's within the IRS. Some clubs have had that status removed. Now, as that means technically the club should no longer exist. So we're making this change to allow the general manager's discretion that a club that's had a temporary removal of its tax status can continue to operate. There we go. Page 21, please, Laura. Again, this is input from a club president. We're just under the RR&Ps as written, a card holder guest can go into a club and register to say, hey, I'm a resident, here's my card, I'm a guest, and wander around the club. In some clubs, that's probably not advisable. They may have valuable items, they may have dangerous equipment. So this was allow the club to modify their bylaws to say that even a card holder guest must be accompanied at all times. There have been issues of security as well as safety. And so that's just to make sure that that can happen if the club so desires. If we move to page 24, please, Laura. This is just basically a reminder here to remind clubs that a certificate is needed for a caterer. This was already in the RR&Ps, but it wasn't in the special events section, which is where most caterers are actually needed. It was in the contractors section, so when somebody's organising a special event with caterers, it's just been put in here as a reminder. And of course, Casey has on file lots of insurance certificates from caterers. So if you're using a caterer, talk to Casey. She's probably already got the certificate, because my understanding is lots of clubs use the same caterers. And down there at 1.28 at the bottom there, 1.27. This is the other counterpart to that commingling one. We're basically saying if your special event is a charity event, a one-off fun social event, then commingling is allowed. And then 1.28 down at the bottom is a reminder about if that event is going to be sponsored, that there are policies in policy FA10 specifically about event sponsorship and the relevant approvals that are required from recreation manager or general manager about signage and so on that goes along with that sponsorship. And page 30, please, Laura. Despite what I said earlier, we did make a change to the disciplinary policies. It was only a minor change. 1.8 there at the bottom used to be down at 1.10. So the club was deciding what they were going to do when it came to disciplining and taking disciplinary action against an individual. And after they'd done that, they went and talked to Casey. What we're suggesting now is that they talk to the recreation manager first just to make sure that the administration is aware of what's going on, and they can provide advice to the board of the club as necessary. Where are we? That was 30. And 33, please, Laura. Pretty soon we'll be halfway through. This is a bullet that's been added into reasons why a club board member might be disciplined, and this is just to emphasize that confidential information is confidential, and like a lot of these RR&Ps, it's actually there as an intent to correct bad behavior which has occurred. So a lot of these are not because we thought them up off the top of our head. A lot of these are coming in because of behavior which has actually occurred. Page 42, please, Laura. There we are. Page 42. Where are we now? Ah, there we go, down at the bottom there on the officers and elections piece. Clubs have been allowed to have co-officers for some time here. We're just adding the requirement that that's also covered in the club bylaws. And on to 43. Big chunk of red here on page 43. Basically, hands up everybody who's part of a club that had electronic voting for officers. Did you know that's not allowed? We're just correcting this here to make that allowed. Under the old RR&Ps, it said that the officers are elected at the annual election meeting. We know that's not practical for a lot of clubs, the larger clubs, and so here we're allowing the possibility that you can do this electronically. We've added a requirement for a secret ballot if there's more than one candidate for a position. And also, some clubs don't elect a president or a vice president. They elect board members, and then those board members themselves select the president and the vice president by a vote within the board. So during the course of their elections, they may be voting for 3 candidates for the governing board. And if they do that, there's a chance that some of those candidates, in fact, all of those candidates, won't get a vote of 51% of the quorum or the member of the club. So this is just closing a technicality that some of those members won't get 51% of the quorum. Also on page 43, down on 211, which is a little further down. Just made a change here to make it clear that the club board members are not receiving compensation for their duties as being a board member of the club. That does then opens up the possibility that a club board member may be able to teach classes and so on within the club, provided the rest of the board agree. Because we've also brought in a requirement that any teaching of that sort is approved by the board and recorded in the minutes. I think that's it for page 43. If we go to page 44, on 3.5 there at the top, it's required that meeting minutes be published within 1 week of the meeting. Yet sometimes you're only having member meetings twice a year. How do you approve the minutes? So we're saying that draft minutes can be posted. A little bit further down, this is just on 3.8 there. This is just correcting something that was in there earlier. Under the guest section, it said that people who were not members of the club, who were guests during a meeting, should identify themselves. The question was, how do they know that they should do that. So all we're simply doing here under the meeting section is saying that the president or whoever's chairing the meeting should ask for guests or non-members to identify themselves, so they're not counted as part of any quorum. Also here, we've added in this section, which of course, as I'm looking around here at club officers in the audience, you will all be very familiar with because it's in the bylaws. It was never in the RR&Ps. So this is simply a cut and paste of the text from the bylaws template, which allows members to call meetings and an individual board member to call a board meeting. And on to page 45. We've struck there the requirement to retain attendance forms because nobody retains attendance forms because we don't need them anymore because we have Club Track. So if anybody ever says we don't take anything out, we've taken out the requirement to do something you weren't doing anyway. Also on page 45, we've just added a couple more requirements on the confidential records that relate to things like disciplinary action, just to track down, make sure that it's been recorded who's actually been accessing them. And on page 46, just bringing the email side of things and club membership things into the 21st century, is that we're saying you can't publish your membership lists online, and you must send any emails to your members BCC. On page 47, we have removed the requirement for clubs that have hidden spaces to have a monitor in every room if you've got cameras covering it. This was a bit of a, it's a difficult thing to write down, but the old RR&Ps required that wherever there's a separate room within a club, that there should be more than 2 people in it. And if there isn't more than 2 people in it, then the monitor needs to be able to see it. So some clubs have cameras, but the rules didn't allow for the fact that some clubs have cameras. So if you do have cameras, then you don't need, if you've got 4 rooms in your club, you don't need 4 people, 4 monitors. You can have 2 monitors and cameras. So it's just let's ease that burden a little bit for some of the larger clubs with bigger spaces. Um, 47. Sorry about this, guys, but it's the law. If your club uses chemicals, we need MSDS sheets for all the chemicals, not just the hazardous ones. And those sheets are actually held by the facility leads in the offices. So you need to work with the facility leads to make sure they've got MSDS sheets for all the chemicals that you're using. And on page 50, we're nearly there, guys. 8 pages to go. This is the thing I mentioned to before about having, making sure you have a board vote for all of the contractors and classes that are going to be taught by club members. And on page 55, just some financial things. We're not changing anything on the financial side. We're just making some clarifications for what already existed. And again, this is correcting to help correct some behaviors. All financial transactions need to go through the club accounts. If you're collecting cash to pay for memberships, that cash must go through the club account. And then when you pay your contractor from a check that's drawn on the club account. You don't just move the cash around. It's to make sure that everything, all the transactions are properly recorded, and that when you come to doing those IRS forms that you need to produce for your contractors, that everything lines up in case of any audits or other issues that may come along. One other requirement here is that it was never in the requirements that individuals within the club, the board, and so on have any spending limits. So we're simply here saying that the club bylaws must state what the spending limits are for an individual member of the board as a whole, or the club. Most clubs already have these in their bylaws in some form, but I do know that one or two clubs missed that when they redid their bylaws. So the typical ones is the president can authorize up to X dollars, the board can authorize up to Y dollars, anything over Y dollars requires a vote of the membership. Those are the way it works typically. Also on page 55, a little bit further down there on 445, this came in again as a result of input from a club president. A large club, lots of spending, lots of transactions, and concern that funds are being dispersed to a member on the presentation of an invoice, when of course an invoice is just a demand for payment, it's not proof of delivery. So we're simply saying here that for those larger clubs with lots of complex transactions going on, lots of people who are authorized to spend money, that those clubs can, if they so desire, can within their bylaws establish tighter controls on the documentation necessary for proof of payment and so on. Rather than impose that on every club, we're making it clear that the larger clubs can do that. Page 56, the next page. One of the things the smaller clubs have to do is file a 990N with the IRS, and one of the other things those clubs had to do was give a copy of that to the recreation centres along with the CR7, I believe, every year. We're just saying if your club only has to produce a 990N, not any of the other 990 forms, just a 990N, the rec centres don't really need a copy of it. There is a checkbox on the CR7 to say you've completed one and filed it. So it's like a bit of trust there for those smaller clubs. 56, down at the bottom there. There was some discussion about this at the Treasurers' meeting recently. We discussed this within the working group, and the consensus of the working group is that the auditor who looks at the club financial records every year cannot be a member of the club's board. And finally, on page 58, as I know that you're all probably very, very, very familiar with the RR&Ps, and you will have noticed that the accommodation section has moved to the end. We put the accommodation section in its own chapter at the end because it applies to all of the RR&Ps, not just the event section where it was before. And then this again is fixing an error. As written, the RR&Ps gave the final say on an accommodation request to the Chartered Clubs Committee. We can't do that. We're not a deciding group, we're a recommending group, so this just changes that so that any accommodation request recommendation to accept or not would go to the governing board from the Chartered Clubs Committee. And that's the end of the changes I wanted to talk about. If we can swap back to the presentation, please. So what happens next? Feedback, please, on these. Not necessarily here today. There'll be an opportunity at the next meeting, but if you have feedback today, it will be welcome. I see. Lynn is already approaching the microphone. We have an email address you see at the bottom of the slide there to send us feedback to the working group by January 21st, please. That would allow us to meet, discuss, decide whether we agree with the feedback or not, and work into a second draft of these changes, which would be coming forward on February 4th. We anticipate there'll be a bit of an iteration, and so we expect to have a final draft by March the 4th, which the committee can then make a consensus recommendation or not to move to the governing board for their discussion. If we are still going back and forth on iterations, then that might slip out to April. The other request is that feedback you give us is on the changes only, please, because we've had an opportunity to give us feedback on all of the RR&Ps. So please give us a feedback on the changes. Changes only. That's our preference at this stage. And that's it for now. So any questions? Any additional comments from any members of the working group, by the way?
Well, thank you, Nick. I think it's obvious how much work this has been for the working group. Going through this has been tedious and will continue for another 2 to 3 months before it is finalized. So we thank all the members of the working group, and thank you, Nick and Vicki, for heading that up. And we will look forward to what comes next, February 4th. Thank you much. Any comments from the public?
Lynn Kellis, 129120. I just wanted some clarification on a couple of things. I think you guys did a great job. I'm just questioning on page 43, 2.6.8, charter clubs are reminded that the RR&Ps have precedence over our bylaws. I'm just wondering, because you made the change on page 23, regarding having the ability to write into our bylaws to have our guests be accompanied for their own safety and club safety. So if we do that, if we put it in our bylaws and tell somebody who wanders in, you can't wander through, we must accompany you, and it says the RR&Ps override that, do they have a case of doing what they want to do? Do we not really have a leg to stand on?
It's a rather generic statement. I admit that paragraph, and you could also just put it in a chapter on its own at the end, or even put it in at the beginning. But in the order of precedence of documents, the RR&Ps sit above the bylaws. Basically, you can, if the RR&Ps allow you to change your bylaws to say, in our club, guests must be accompanied at all times, the only thing that would result in that being overridden by the RR&Ps would be that taken out of the RR&Ps and somebody saying that guests can wander around freely. And I don't see that happening, to be honest.
From telling them they must be accompanied?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you. And one other thing you kind of breezed by, oh gosh, sorry, I didn't write the page number down, maybe it was the same one, 2.11, board members. You had mentioned something about a board member can't be paid, we know that, but you did say something about that they can teach classes now?
The RR&Ps allow a club member to teach classes without a contract, and they're not paid. But that club member can receive donations, gifts from people taking the class. We're just trying to make that also applicable if that class teacher is a board member.
So pretty much the same then, just you can't be paid. You can do it, but you can't be paid for it. Okay, thank you.
So you can't be paid for being the president of the board and doing the duties of the president, but you could be paid, or you could receive those same gifts as an ordinary member if that board member is teaching a class.
They could receive it as a donation,
Yes.
but we cannot take a board member and pay them to teach a class.
No, they would then become a contractor and you'd have to go down that route.
Perfect. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Any other comments from the audience? Any comments online, Nick? Nothing online. Well, we thank you very much. Obviously, the RR&Ps are an ongoing study. We're moving on then to 5.01, committee comments. And before we get into the comments, I would like to introduce our IT director, who is Kyle Hockman. Kyle, if you would go to the mic and just give us an elevator talk about who you are.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Kyle Hockman. I'm a new IT director here at Sun City West. I've been in IT for about 20 years now. 15 of those years have been in hospitality at hotels and resorts and country clubs, working with golf courses, point of sale systems, activities. And the last couple of years I've been with Blue Star Resort and Golf, which manages about 20 HOA communities across the country. I know Trilogy of Estancia, kind of up to 303 is one of them. Sun Lake, Santa Chandler is one of the locations. So I've had some good experience the last couple of years working with boards. So would love to get to know you guys better, see what you do here, and kind of work hand in hand with you, kind of help technology get into the next 21st century.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Welcome. The board talked about the need to update a lot of our technology here a couple months ago, and Kyle is a result of those discussions. So that's really good news. Comments from the committee? Nancy, let's start with you.
Kyle, you're the one I'm looking for. Welcome to the swim team. No, it was an interest. I got to go home and study these RR&Ps now. Thank you.
I just want to thank Nick for all his extra hard work, and Vicky and Pat on the working group, because Nick was the pen. We gave all the, and it's as complex as it is for us, it was 10 times as much for him, technically getting this document printed, and just thank you for your hard work.
I'll talk to Kyle about how you do reset numbering in Word documents later.
Denise?
I just want to agree with David. The whole working group did a great job, and I know what I'll be reading before I go to sleep for the next 2 weeks.
Mike?
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I just want to put my 2 cents in and thank you for all the hard work that you did on here. I read through the whole thing again also, and a lot of red ink that goes along with that, and I just hope there wasn't too many controversies.
Any further comments, Nick?
No, I've said enough.
Vicky?
Our last meeting for the working group was December 20th. We met 9 times, that is true. I don't even want to think about the number of times each one of us read the document during the week. This is now the 7th of January, and every time I close my eyes for longer than a nanosecond, it scrolls from the preamble to the end, still.
Thank you, Vicky. Pat?
Well, being new to this committee and new, I've learned a lot. And again, Nick did an amazing job. So I appreciate you, Nick.
Cheryl?
Okay, everything was great. And to answer one of the questions, I teach a lot of the classes for the fitness club, but I fill in. So, and I do not get paid. So if you ever see me out there, I'm bellowing out orders for everybody to do things. And I will look at, and also I'm the treasurer of the fitness club. So I'll be looking at some of the things. And I do have a question looking at it, that I will email you.
Thank you. Casey, any final comments?
Not really, just thank you for putting that together and inviting me, throwing me in when you needed a real quick question during meetings. But when I was throwing the RR&Ps in 2017, it was just a little itty bitty document. And so learning these over and over has been challenging. So thank you for trying to at least makes a little bit more sense of some things.
All right, any final comments from the audience? If not, I will thank you all for your presence. It's been a long meeting, but I think there'll be some more long meetings when we deal with the RR&Ps. And our next committee meeting will be on February 4th, Friday at 1:30 in the lecture hall. No, that's not on a Friday. That must be meeting on Tuesday, February 4th. Sorry about that. We're always on Tuesday. February 4th, 1:30, right here. If there aren't any other comments, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.